Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week,
we own the well-being of our employees 24/7. It doesn't stop. You have to provide an environment where they feel safe to talk about things, share things. It's okay to say, I have a mental health issue.
71% of managers say mental health programs are very much needed, and yet the majority of businesses are planning to roll back mental health initiatives, roll back flexible working. So that's the paradox.
For a long, long time, we've talked about human capital management. I mean, what a dreadful phrase, right? About people.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday.
Hey, how are you? We're the home of the UK's conversation about mental health. It's Mental Health Monday. My name's Mick, and thanks for checking out the podcast, and thanks for your downloads today. Best of luck to those theatre shows that we talked about the last two episodes. Your Mam on a UK tour with Majid, aka Luke, on the programme last week. Before that, I've seen some rave reviews of the Cherry Jezebel show. We talked about that in two podcasts previous to this one as well, so great to hear that as well. In terms of myself, this week, I mentioned last week I was at the Liverpool City Region Culture and Creativity Awards, which was really nice to be nominated as a finalist in the health and wellbeing category for the work we did on our Ironman project. And it was a great night, and we had a really fab time down at Cronton College there, who hosted it. Brilliant night. Last week was a real struggle for me, and probably in the spirit of the programme, I don't mind talking about it. And I'm not necessarily quite sure specifically what it was, but I just found myself in a lull. That's probably the way I would describe it. A lull, which I found it really, really difficult to shake myself out of. So you can imagine, having spoken to however many hundred people about mental health, I'm kind of aware of what some of those signs are. Still comes to me as a real shock when I start to experience negative mental health. It comes with feelings of worthlessness. It comes with feelings of what's the point? It comes with feelings of, how do you describe it? What's the point in leaving the house? That would be another of those sorts of things. And I know, because of the stuff that I've done over the years and the conversations I've had, I know that this is me experiencing poor mental health. But the brain is a tricky old customer, and it feels very much, and I had this experience in my early 20s as well, that it's not just you feeling a bit down, that this is the real you, and you've been found out, and people are going to find you out, and what's the point? And it's not to the point, I must say, and I'll make this clear, this is not to the point of feeling anything like, suicidal, but more like, what's the point? What's the bigger picture? What's going on here? What's each day about? Which are big questions to ask, and, important questions to ask, but important questions to ask from a positive point of view, like proactively. Whereas when you're in poor mental health, I find that it comes from a negative point of view. It comes from a, what's the point in doing that anyway? What's the point in even doing something that's good? Because, I'll still wake up tomorrow morning and the world will just be the same. And maybe this is sort of enhanced, if you like, by the situation in Ukraine, which has left people feeling hopeless and helpless, I think, because of the situation and the sheer awfulness of the way the aggressors are going about their acts against perfectly innocent people, that makes you feel angry. Maybe that's my brain's way of trying to contextualize your own endeavours as being, not as important. But of course, everyone's endeavours important. Everyone's life's important. What I try and do in terms of counteracting that, try to sleep, try not to drink too much coffee, try to go for a run. Now, the annoying thing was I'd done a lot of those things. And that was one of the shocks to me when I started feeling like that last week, that I couldn't get out of the funk. Like, I'd done the things I normally do, and yet I still didn't feel myself again. So that was a little bit of a warning sign for me there, that actually it's about keeping on top of those things, but also finding those other opportunities as well. So one of the things I was keen to do by the back end of last week, I organised like a couple of I don't want to say dates, but put dates in the diary for things to look forward to, things that I was going to engage with. Also got out and about in the garden, got involved in some activities, planted some seeds, and that very much grounds you. And by the weekend, I was okay again, and I felt absolutely fine. But just a little personal reminder to myself that these feelings do come about. They can affect everyone, and they can affect anyone, and they can come at any time, even inconvenient times. And I was lucky enough to be able to talk to my wife about it and just say, I just feel like I'm really struggling at the moment. And we kind of talked it through. That helped as well, I must absolutely say. But I wanted to just mention it at the start of the podcast, because sometimes people go, oh yeah, Mick, it's, you must be, hunky-dory with your mental health because of everything you talk about. And sometimes it's not the case. I wanted to mention it, talk about it, and kind of be honest with you as a podcast listener as well. Should we move on to this week's show? Now, the back end of last year, at the start of this year, we talked with an organisation called GoodShape, and we got some stats from them. It was really fascinating, and it put into picture, and it put into the frame, front and centre, about the issues that mental health and poor mental health were bringing to businesses. By that, stats which proved that actually the total absences from workplaces in the UK last year, the main reason for said absences was mental health problems, not COVID-19, which you think would sound crazy given everything going on around isolation and people needing time off and all that kind of stuff. No, mental health was the number one reason. There's some new stats that have come out, so we've got GoodShape back on. They're talking about now what workplaces are planning to do from a mental health point of view as we move away from the pandemic. Now, as part of this, 71% of managers surveyed, more than 750 of them, say mental health programs are much needed and that occupational health is very important. 64% are there. 80% of managers take well-being seriously. So some really positive stats. But at the same time, check this out. 56% of businesses, the majority of businesses, expect there to be a rolling back in mental health initiatives. So businesses who did things positively for staff mental health and well-being during the pandemic are planning to roll those things back after the pandemic is over, as if the pandemic's over, so the mental health of our staff isn't as important anymore, which strikes me as absolutely bonkers. I mean, this seems 57% are going to reduce flexible working. Just think about the opportunity that flexible working can give an individual. Now, the human costs are absolutely clear, but also this is stacked up as well in terms of financial cost to businesses who don't take mental health seriously, looking at around about £8 billion a year in absences from businesses who don't look after their staff or have programs in place which allow them to get help if they require mental health support. So it strikes me as absolutely bizarre that the majority of businesses, particularly from this survey from GoodShape and Ipsos Mori, that the majority, 56%, are planning to roll them back. Imagine scrapping your mental health initiatives now instead of maintaining them, bringing them forward, enhancing them to build on the work you've developed over the pandemic. It's a really strange situation. We'll also introduce, as well as part of the conversation, this idea of well-being washing. This idea that businesses sometimes claim to be all very important. Oh, mental health, yes, we do this. Oh, yes, we are very important mental health. But at the same time, go about practices which are the complete opposite. It's a little bit like greenwashing when businesses claim to be very environmentally friendly, but then do practices and things like that, which are the exact opposite. But, 2% of their work is green, so that's a real tick. No, it shouldn't be accepted. We shouldn't accept it. And actually, we should demand better. Alun Baker is the CEO of GoodShape, joined us on the programme this week to talk through the survey results. And we were both pretty surprised by what we found.
Yeah, Mick, it's kind of shocking of all of that research. And it was done by Ipsos Mori. So, a brilliantly well-respected organization for doing major surveys like this. And when you look at everything in there, there's some real insights into the way we look at well-being in the workplace overall. And when you see that specific thing, you think, don't we get it? How can you possibly believe that, yes, mental health went up because of COVID? Absolutely, because people were isolated, there was fear, there was something disrupting our world in a way we hadn't seen probably since, World War II or something. And this definitely impacted people. But the trend for mental health health, if we look at it since 2016, it's gone up 50% in the workplace. And it's been increasing about 10% a year, just under, over the last several years. Last year in particular, in 2021, it went up 17%, as we saw COVID just coming to a light at the end of the tunnel. Mental health was still rising. This is not going away. And the idea that you think you can roll this back is, Mick, it bothers me, right? It really bothers me. And I'll tell you why. For a long, long time, we've talked about human capital management. I mean, what a dreadful phrase, right? About people. We talk about the value of people. And I've been in so many organizations where the CEO will stand up and say, people are our number one asset. Yet we measure the mean time between failure of an asset. We do preventative maintenance on assets. We know when an asset tolerances are. We won't push it because we know it'll break. We don't do any of that for people, our number one asset. And now we're saying we're going to roll back something that is having a material impact on people's lives. It's astounding, quite frankly. And it just tells me that the C-suite in particular do not truly value well-being in the workplace, and they're paying lip service, particularly something like mental health.
I wanted to introduce a phrase. I'll copyright this at a later date, but this idea of well-being washing, that you would have a business or organization that goes, oh, absolutely, people are our number one priority and our number one asset, and we take our mental health of our people very, very seriously. Brackets, but we're not going to invest in that in any way, shape, or form. If we have to tick a box on it, we will say that we can tick a box. Maybe we'll have a helpline number that's, tattooed, onto the bottom of a desk that you've got to try and track down and find somewhere on the third floor. But that idea of well-being washing, I wonder whether that's a trend which we now need to very much keep an eye out for. Businesses that say they're mental health friendly, but actually then go about doing the opposite.
Yeah, again, Mick, from my side, I see a rise in humanity, right? And I think it started with people starting to worry about things like climate change. COVID hits, and then you start to think people matter more than anything, and we paid lip service even to that concept. And then you see Russia invading Ukraine, and the world has responded in a certain way. You see 200-300 major global companies withdrawing from Russia, despite the cost to their business, despite the potential impact on share price. Why? Is it because they have a soul, or is it because they realize that people will turn against any brand that doesn't put the well-being of people at the top of their agenda? You see it in global geopolitics, and you also see it in businesses. If your brand is not seen as an ethical brand, and if you don't look like a company that really cares about its people, the consequences can be dire. You'll never recover from that, by the way. If people expose your brand as having a disregard for people's well-being, and there are incidents in the workplace and incidents in your company that are either more significant than other places, or you as an organization are not caring, people are leaving those organizations. We've had this great resignation. People are saying things like well-being and mental health are the single most important thing they want to see in the workplace. Above even, it's more significant than salary, it's more significant than flexible working for people. So when you see this, if you stop listening, that tells me you really don't care. And the thing I feel, Mick, is even when you see things like well-being, look, you have, everyone's heard of balanced scorecards, or KPIs, or OKRs, right? And you have them for everything in your business. Everything that moves, you're measuring. Nobody measures well-being. And that, to me, says it all. If you don't measure it, you don't care, you can't improve it, no one's responsible for it. And really, it's lip service. And I love your phrase, by the way, well-being washing. You're just washing it because you're ticking the box.
I mean, there's a lack of measurement, but we've got data, and actually your data throws up 71% of managers say mental health programs are very much needed. 80% of managers take well-being seriously. 73% say it counts towards financial performance of an organization. And yet the majority of businesses are planning to roll back mental health initiatives, roll back flexible working. So that's the paradox, isn't it? People who know it makes a difference, or even if it is anecdotally, they know that it makes a difference. And yet when they're being asked to look at a piece of paper, an Excel spreadsheet with their costs for the year, they've looked at a mental health or well-being program and they've thought, well, let's get rid of that. That's the thing we don't need, even though they know it works.
So if you look at the strange thing about mental health is, even though the incidences might be fourth or fifth in terms of, for absence, right? So we've got billions of records and we've got hundreds of millions of absence records over time. And when you look at all of these, even though mental health incidences is, fourth perhaps in a league table, it's number one in terms of the time lost. So when you look at something like that, you go, wow, I don't understand the value or the productivity issues attached to it. Mick, we're working on something really revolutionary, right? We've been working with Deloitte on an AI tool, which we now see, and this is so important, you can see the incidence of absences happening over time and the severity. And we're getting to a point we believe we can predict absences at nearly 85% accuracy, particularly long-term absences. And that will be related to things like mental health. So when you see this, patterns are everywhere in your business with data. And when you see it, when you say to me, it doesn't matter, or we're not measuring it, or we don't think it's important, or we don't, do you know what? You should be doing this for the well-being people. You should be doing this because you really mean it when you say the words, people are my number one asset. But even if you need a hard P&L number at the bottom of this, it's there. It's just because you've never truly measured it, you don't understand it. But, I look at people, young people coming through the workplace, they're looking for something in a business and they're looking for a soul. They're looking for a company that cares. They're looking for you to demonstrate that. And just these tick in the box, like you say, things like EAP, everybody's got this telephone number. Ring it if you're feeling, really depressed, feeling suicidal. We're training, the staggering one to me is, and I do believe, absolutely the mental health and physical health ought to be treated the same way. We are looking at a stat yesterday, Mick, which is staggering. When somebody rings us to say they're going to be absent, and we triage you through to a point you speak to a nurse because it's more critical, we asked for the reason for your absence, and you have the right to refuse. It's part of GDPR and everything else. And about 1.57, being really accurate, of people refuse to give their absence reasons. 6% won't give it if it's linked to mental health. So there's still this awful stigma. It's nearly 400% higher. People refuse to give that as a reason. Because if you have a job that says high pressure job, stressful environment, and you go, I'm feeling stressed, how do you talk to management about this? And by the way, you've got mental health first aiders. We were looking through some of our records this week again, right, Mick? These are some of the nurse records we've got. A caller's wife is in ICU, is terminally ill, he's thinking of ending his life. How do you deal with that? Somebody that's lost their child is going back to work and she feels like she's a nurse. She feels like she's unsafe around other babies because of it. How does somebody that's trained in mental health first aid deal with that if you don't provide professional health, professional support, and make people feel it's okay, right? It's okay to do this. Because one of the things we focus on is day one intervention. We're looking to go earlier, right? If I see patterns, can we intervene earlier before it gets serious? If we help you then not get to a critical point, and we're dealing with what we call blue light or critical incidences, roughly about 30 people, about 15 people in every 100,000, right? A week, that is. Think about that. Somebody needs to go to A&E, have a critical situation, which could be they're feeling suicidal, they feel, anger to people in their household that is critical. And we're just ignoring it. These people are your people. And if you care about them, you can't only care about them when they're even in the workplace. You've got to provide a support mechanism that says, we're giving you a mobile phone, Mick. We're actually expecting you to answer that outside of working hours. People are under more pressure than ever before. When can I say no to something? I used to have a CMO who's a brilliant guy, and he never meant this, but he sent loads of emails out on a Sunday because he wanted to clear his brain. His 60 odd people in his team used to feel they've got to respond on a Sunday. And I went to stop it, put timing on Outlook so people receive it on a Monday. The pressure people feel from constant engagement, constantly on. And then we're saying, by the way, when you're outside of work, we're certainly not caring for you either. Even though we're expecting you to engage outside of working hours, be on call, be responsible. We own the well-being of our employees 24/7. It doesn't stop. You have to provide an environment where they feel safe to talk about things, share things. It's okay to say, I have a mental health issue. Another example, Mick, is staggering. 59% of women are saying they're suffering from menopause in the workplace. And most of us, particularly us men, think, we've read about this, we feel enlightened, we're modern men, it's about night sweats, it's about all of these things. It's not, it's feeling depressed, feeling unworthy, having memory loss. It's people talk about foggy brains over this. All of these things are mental health issues, yet we do nothing to help women with menopause in the workplace at all. And yet we have an aging workforce, and we're going to be working later. So you've got both males and females coming through that period in their working lives. What are we doing to support them?
Well,
Sorry, you got me on a soapbox, Mick.
I think it's so important. I mean, the organisation that I work for, we've got the "Where's Your Head At" campaign, which is called for the mental health first aid trainers within each workplace. So it's not just here's a signpost to a helpline. It's when you go through the door, if you cut your finger, here's such a body with the plasters. If you need to speak to someone, here's an individual, a contact that you can go and speak to specifically. 45% of middle managers, according to your survey, had no mental health training. Only 1 in 3 had been offered. And actually, I think you touched on it as well, 48%, around about half, they want more training, and they also want the specialist training. So those who've got that sort of brief overview, if you like, for the first aid, they're now saying, right, give me more, like give me some of the specialist stuff, give me a bit of the top up, if you like, on menopause might be an issue, or grief, or something that may be a little bit more industry specific. So it strikes me that whenever we cut to the people in this survey, the actual human beings, they seem to get it. It's just this wider industry, and maybe this comes from board level senior management, that they just presume that because a couple of people below them have signed up to a course, that therefore their company is now in a much better shape. But I wonder whether or not some of the things we talked about there, some of the issues and the highlight and the things that you highlighted there, if that is lived in terms of a positive experience from board level, like the CEO down, that it is expected within an organization that you have somewhere to turn, that it is expected that if you are struggling, you can flag it upstream so that it doesn't end up downstream and end up in, that there should be an expectation. And that can only come, can't it, from top down. That has to, everyone who comes into the business has to learn about it, has to know about it. If it grows from the bottom up, it eventually peters out. It's got to come from the top down, hasn't it?
Yeah, Mick, and again, there's undeniable stats around this. We see a 50% reduction in long-term absences for people that get help and support, right? So that tells you the impact it's having. And if you're looking at productivity numbers, surely there are things even as a CEO you can't ignore. But it's more than that. For me, it's, as you just said, there is people power now, that rise of humanity. So you are seeing this groundswell, and people are voting with their feet, right? They talk about it on things like Glassdoor. They leave organizations. So it's remarkable. Perhaps it's such a sensitive subject that people are still so uncomfortable talking about it that the C-suite don't want to bring it up, and the chief exec don't want to talk about it. But when you look at the reality in your organization, we're talking about major potential consequences here. And if you don't take ownership of that, what does it say about you? If you don't understand as a business that how critical this thing is, what does it say about your organization and your brand? You're not living any of your brand values that you write about in your annual reports. Do you know the other one that's really surprising, Mick? There's a big rise, probably one of the newest roles that you're seeing increasing is Chief Wellness Officer. See, this is a new title. We talked to loads of them. Most of them have this new role. And if you say to them, what does the next 12 months look like for you? What does the next 2 years look like for you? What outcomes do you want to drive in your business? How are you measuring them? You're met with blank faces mostly. So it's again, even though you're bringing that head in, they're almost person without real power and portfolio.
And so let me, I don't know, I'm not trying to create a job for myself here, but if I'm applying for that job and I'm talking about chief wellness, I'm looking at that sort of day-to-day awareness of mental health, also that, those points of contact, but presumably I'm also looking at productivity levels. I'm looking at individuals and individuals' performance. I'm presumably I'm also looking at staff retention and, people leaving the business because they're looking elsewhere. So although, the chief wellness officer, obviously, the hippie who lives, in a caravan in the car park outside, there's a daily meditation session. Actually, they would play a key role, wouldn't they, within a business in terms of staff retention, staff happiness, and then obviously productivity that comes alongside that.
Yeah, so the stats, because of one of the really fortunate things we have in GoodShape, because we collect the data at the point of absence. That's really rare, right? Makes you can see all of these stats roll through. We could identify, for example, which manager has got more mental health or issues under them, right? You can look at which warehouse has more musculoskeletal issues. What caused that? Was it a change in shift patterns? Is it a newly appointed manager that doesn't know how to manage people? So if you're the wellness officer and you've got that data, you can go, okay, I need to train some people here. What happened? Did we increase or decrease something that caused these incidences to rise? So you see the cause and effect too, so it allows you to take action. And if you're measuring that, you're looking at it, you're tracking it, you can say, okay, there's something wrong here. I need to address it. And then it's not, look, everyone's heard of occupational health. Occupational health was originally set up to give you a quick sort of checkup before you joined a company, make sure you're fit and healthy, and then you had it done every couple of years. And just before you leave a business, when you're retiring particularly, make sure that we don't have any responsibility for hearing, eyesight, that we, not going to get sued by it. A lot of occupational health was really focused on risk mitigation for organizations. EAP services, they've been around for a long time, employee assisted programs, 3 to 4% engagement. But I've ticked my box, right? You've got this, haven't you? You can go and ring this number if you have a problem. We don't. Most of us, when you look at mental health, most of us, I don't know about you, right? But the medical profession today, and I've got loads of friends who are GPs, they are so far behind being on the front foot that now it's about pain before you get to see a GP. If you want an emergency, it's the balance between, do I go to A&E or my GP? And when you ring the doctor, any outcome could come from that, right? So the GP will see you today if it's an emergency, or they'll see you next week if it's not. How do you think people are getting supported in mental health in that scenario? What happens, Mick? Do I need to tell somebody I'm feeling suicidal? Do I need to tell somebody I can't get out of bed in the morning because I'm feeling sad in a way I don't understand it? The trigger points are all the way through to that level of extreme, and it can be stopped early if you have a wellness and support for mental health issues, allow people to talk about it, give them support. You know, we're looking at the moment of making an investment in a company that provides chat therapy for mental health from within teams or from within Slack, from within your workplace, to go, do you know what, I'm feeling like this. Is this normal? Because we have to make it normal in our heads, right? Because it's one of the hardest things in the world to turn around and say, I've got a mental health issue.
Absolutely, but I think that can change, though, can't it? With openness, with communication, and actually, when you step in the door, that you say, "Here is our policy. If you're feeling like this, you can speak to this person." We actually have a well-being day policy whereby, you know what, no questions asked. If you need a day off, here's the process in place that's for that. Instead, our mental health program is the equivalent of, here's your first aid training. Now come and juggle these chainsaws, and here's the number for 999 if you need to call.
Absolutely.
Which is an equivalent which shouldn't work. Instead, here's the helpline number, brackets, here's a load, and here are 15 files that I want you to go through before close of play Sunday. There's a huge difference there, isn't there? And I think if you try and react to it, then you're forever fighting a fire. But it's about those proactive steps, isn't it? And I think I touched on this with Suzanne Marshall when we spoke last time, looking at a previous survey from GoodShape. This idea that there needs to be, doesn't there, a kite mark, a standard that people expect. So when you talked about young people going into a workplace, you could say, that somebody might be an investor in people, they may be at X, Y, or Z, but they would have do you have, it's almost that question, isn't it? Are there any other questions, at the end of an interview? You could say, yes, do you have whatever that policy is, in procedure in place, that businesses would then see that their potential employees wanted or were demanding a process around mental health to be in place within that workplace. And everyone knows there's going to be everyone knows there's going to be a first aid scheme, and everyone does it on the first day. And here's where you go, here's where the bandages are, here are the plasters, here are the fire extinguishers, and all of those sorts of things. But to instill that within a workplace, that if you are struggling with your mental health, these are the processes, and you can do it at any point. And you don't have to wait until you're in a crisis. You could raise these issues at any point. That's a big cultural shift, isn't it? But like anything else in business, you can put those things in place if you choose to, and you choose to value it.
You're absolutely spot on, Mick, because you think about, first aid, the physical health thing in the workplace. It's actually, if you think about it, it's a reaction to an accident, right? Or that you're medically able to go into that high crane because you've had your heart test, you've had a medical recently, or you're able to pick up heavy stuff, or whatever it might be. And even in, this is in services jobs and everything else. So it's all about an accident happened. How do I respond to an accident, right? Or you're healthy enough to be in the workplace to do the job as defined by your job role. And if you think of the construct of that, it's mostly about, I'm trying to protect people in a crisis situation, emergency situation. I'm trying to also protect and de-risk my company. That's where you're focused on. Look at mental health. That is a buildup of anxiety issues over time that manifests itself in severe situations at a point where it's too late. But before then, that moment of lack of concentration, imagine the impact that can have in safety in the workplace. Why are you not concentrating? Because you're distracted, you're depressed, there's something affecting your mental health. You don't see that. So with mental health well-being, you've got to get on the front foot. You've got to create an environment to help people's mental health and mental well-being. Mental health is not once it's reached that tipping point, it's help it prevent to get to that tipping point by giving people help and understanding of things that they see evolving in themselves, understanding themselves and talking about it, as you just said, and communicating. Let's stop it getting critical, because at a point it gets critical, it is one of the most dangerous things that can happen in the workplace, or when somebody's at home. All the consequences are so severe for this. But people's ability to just even perform as human beings, if they are severely depressed or they have really deep bouts of mental illness, is extraordinary. It's too late when it gets to that point. Help people identify it early. Help people get help when they need it early. That they can take time off work when they need to. They get support, and we return them to work safely. Because this is a hidden thing for most people. It only surfaces at a critical moment. You've got to get on the front foot with mental health.
Absolutely. And the other thing, the final point to make, I think, Alun, is it's win-win. That if your staff are happy, they're productive, the business is successful, fewer headaches for management to deal with, and the costs associated with absences from mental health run into the millions and then billions. So actually, it pays for itself as well to have these structures in place.
Yeah, look, we have this, we're called GoodShape. We rebranded last year, and the thought behind it was, if people are in good shape, your company's in good shape, not the other way around, right? So make sure people feel comfortable, motivated, supported. If you feel like that, you feel like your employer cares. You know this, Mick, sorry, whether you're a football manager, whether you're managing any type of business or sports team, you motivate your people by you having a group of people that believe you as a manager cares and know what you're doing. But it's all about, do you care enough about me? I can get a short-term gain from pushing productivity through the roof, but like a machine, it breaks if you stretch people too far. But if I think you care, I'll go through a wall for my manager. So if they think a company cares, that's how it affects productivity. People get up, they're motivated, they're happier. All of those things are proven to have a massive improvement in productivity and the success of a business. So it just makes total sense to do this, and people need to wake up to it, and people need to take ownership of it. So I have this saying that says, look, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So measure this, measure performance improvement outcomes of well-being initiatives, show it's making a difference, and you can do that. If you put a number on this, you put an objective on this, then companies take full responsibility for it, and not lip service, and not well-being washing, as you've talked about.
Thank you for your time. Alun Baker, GoodShape CEO. I really appreciate you joining us on Mental Health Monday.
Thanks, Mick. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for your time.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.